One other thing I wanted to respond to that you mentioned there about devotees that are struggling in their lives and turn to different venues of excesses, we could say. We only do that when we have not realized the real joy that can be there from practicing Krishna consciousness. Yes, life's a struggle. It's difficult. Even as a Vaishnava, I mean, all we have to do is look at chapter 8 of the Bhagavatam, prayers of Queen Kunti. Queen Kunti and the Pandavas struggled so much. But because they were deeply devoted to Krishna and deeply connected to Krishna, they were able to surpass that. When we face those types of struggles, we have to find something that gives us that connection.
All right, are you comfortable?
I'm completely comfortable.
You got great socks. I appreciate the socks. And I knew you were going to come in as the best dressed. That I was expecting.
Well, I'm not known for being shy when it comes to colors.
All right, we're going to start with our jingle. Udi, let it rip.
From Alachua, Florida, this is Nectar Talks.
In collaboration with Krishna.com.
And in service to our bhakti community.
You're the last person that should be shy.
Good. Great to be here.
Uncle Chaz.
Yeah.
You know, I have to admit, I always refer you as Uncle Chaz. And that comes from a deep place in my heart.
Well, I'll tell you a story about that. I have a dear friend, Kalpa Vriksha, in Jersey, tattoo artist of world renown, and he has a phrase that he told me that he and his wife trade back and forth as they were raising their children. WWCD. What would Uncle Chaz do?
I love it. And you know, that proves my point, which I was going to say. I bet you're an uncle to a lot of people all around the world. So thanks for being here.
Well, you know, I find it easier to be an uncle than to be a guru.
There you go.
Because several of the senior ISKCON leaders that have guru positions that are in the sannyasi ashram have disciples that come to them with household problems.
Right.
And they say, go see Chaturatma. So yeah. I try to be encouraging like that.
Well, that's wonderful.
And it gives you a little more freedom to just be out there and available and open to a variety of topics and conversations that they may not be able to have with their guru.
Right. And that's exactly what I hope to do with you today, Uncle Chaz.
Let's see where it goes.
And just to give people an idea of how you managed to establish such a friendly, loving, intimate relationship, I get text messages from Uncle Chaz on a regular basis, and it's usually some of the heaviest, hardcore, punk rock music that you can find out there, because he knows that's deep inside a little bit of where I'm at, and I think deep inside that's a little bit of where he's at, and we have an awesome connection on music. We actually did out of all things, a Shelter cover band for a little while, didn't we?
We did.
That was a lot of fun.
That was some of the best fun, being on stage with you. And then we had you as our guest lead guitarist for one of our Blind Uncle Band performances.
That's right. We did do that.
Actually, it's come to, I guess not much surprise, to the knowledge of Raghunath, the lead singer of Shelter, that we did a cover band. He's mentioned it in conversation a couple of times.
That's great.
He'd introduced me. This is Chaturatma, my dear friend, someone who helped bring me to Krishna Consciousness, and he did a cover band of Shelter.
That's awesome. And I have to share that even, to highlight Chaturatma's infectious, ever-youthful energy, you would put me to shame at band practice. Like, it's just us in my garage. I'm trying to be, crazy wacky on the guitar, but you're the one that's literally bouncing off the walls, singing Shelter songs at band practice. Yeah. I mean, you have quite some energy, and I love that about you. How do you do that? Is that just natural?
Tons of vitamins and supplements.
Yeah, there you go. That's the secret. All right, well, let's get into it. Are you originally from New York, or you just spent a a lot of your youth in New York?
Spent a good part of my youth in Krishna Consciousness in New York.
Okay.
I'm originally from St. Louis.
St. Louis. That's
Born and bred, joined the temple there. Temple commander, book distributor, cook, Sankirtan leader. And then eventually ended up on Radha Damodar, which eventually ended me in New York. And I was in New York for like 12 years or so. I was, that's when my wife and I got married. We met in Chicago and then both ended up transferring back in the day to New York. And we spent the first formative years of our marriage there in New York City.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about who you were before Krishna Consciousness in St. Louis. How old were you when you joined?
What's that?
When you joined Krishna Consciousness, how old were you?
I was 21.
21. All right. So tell me a little bit about prior to that. Yeah.
Let me see, I was 21, so I graduated from high school in 71. And by that point, I'd already decided college just wasn't in my cards. Had no interest, had no motivation, and quite frankly, had no financing. And not to my parents' discredit, but they never did anything to prepare me for here's exams or here's how you apply for grants or anything like that.
Right.
I got out of college, I stuck my thumb out and hit the road. And hitchhiked all over America, down to Mexico, back and forth. And for a good portion of that, I lived in a commune. And that commune...
In Mexico?
In St. Louis.
Oh, okay.
In the suburbs. Now it's a car dealership, I think.
Okay.
But,
tell me about what is a commune in the 60s?
Well, this would have been the early 70s.
Okay.
We were a macrobiotic commune following the principles of macrobiotic diet. We also owned a health food store. The interesting thing about this is there were 11 people in the commune. 9 became devotees.
Wow.
7 are still devotees. And 5 have a connection here with Alachua.
Wow.
So
That's
it was just
amazing.
like a last karma burning ground, if you can use that phrase, before we moved in. And just one by one, different members of the commune, we had someone from the St. Louis Temple that was coming out there from time to time. This was before I came to the commune, and kind of sharing Krishna consciousness as was common back in those days.
Okay.
And so in the commune, they had a Panchatattva altar.
Oh.
We had a Tulsi plant. The different members were reading Prabhupada's books. The interesting thing is the 2 people that didn't become devotees were the couple, the husband and wife that ran the commune, that started it, and that had very little interest, if any, in Krishna consciousness.
Interesting. So it started off as a kind of a dietary commune.
Absolutely.
And many of you kind of started to turn it into a little ashram, a little bhakti ashram.
More or less, more or less.
Wow, very interesting. So, like many, amazing first-generation devotees, at 21, you dedicated your life to this. Tell us a little bit about what are some of the exciting things that you've done between then and now. And I know there's a whole lot. You're going to have to narrow it down. I mean, I want to know things like, you're touring with Indradyumna Swami and the festivals in Poland. Tell us about some of those exciting things that were really meaningful to you as a devotee, and perhaps as far as the contributions that they were.
Well, the year that I joined was Gaur Purnima of 1973, just right after that, the day after, I believe. And the temple I was in, there were 26, 27 devotees. 3 or 4 were initiated. The rest of us were all bhaktas and bhaktins. And then that December, we held big initiation. Letters, of course, as was the time back then, were written to Prabhupada, and he approved the names and the beads and so on like that. And it was arranged at that Christmas marathon that every devotee that went out on book distribution could keep a percentage, and I forget what the percentage was, of their collections each day towards a ticket to go to Mayapur in 1974 for the Gaur Purnima Festival. And that was my first trip to India. Okay. Now, prior to joining Krishna Consciousness, actually moving into the ashram, that had been my plan. Go to India, find a guru. So I had already been dabbling in Eastern philosophy and all like that. So when I went to India, it was a amazing experience for me. Back then we didn't have a lot of projects developed. I mean, you go to Mayapur now and it's a virtual city.
Yeah.
Back then it was one building,
Right.
unfinished, and fields everywhere. So the arrangements were rudimentary at best and ghastly at worst. But it just made a real impression on me. So I came back from that really fixed. Prabhupada was there and came back from that trip really focused. Now, the second half of that trip, we all went to Vrindavan. And they were finishing up Krishna Balaram. It would be open just a year later. And being in Vrindavan really just captured me. I didn't understand how much at the time. Fast forward back to the temple, book distributor, and then I eventually became the head pujari, got very, very involved in deity worship, helping to install the deities there.
This was in St. Louis?
In St. Louis.
Okay. I just want to touch on one thing real quick. When you say you were already dabbling in Eastern philosophy and all that at the time, tell me what did that come from? Is it just you're asking yourself the typical big questions about life, or where did that spiritual spark begin for you?
I was raised very religious. My mother and father were very serious Christians. We went to church, Bible school. I was an assistant in the children's Bible study, all these different things. So I had this religious involvement that was there. But I remember when I was taking my confirmation classes in my early teens, I had certain questions, of which I don't remember what the questions were now, but I had certain questions I asked the pastor, which he couldn't answer. And it wasn't like, well, I don't know, but if you look in chapter such and such as, he just didn't have a clue. And as was the general mood of the youth at that time of just kind of rebelling, that was my key to, okay, this isn't where I'm at. And then I started dabbling.
Got you.
Reading books on Eastern philosophy. I became a vegetarian, took up practicing yoga. This would have been 1969, 70. And that was the mood of the country at that point, that whole alternative.
Yeah.
And not to put too much praise on it, but I, at that time, experimented with a lot of psychedelics, which had a quasi, at least in our own thinking, spiritual drive behind them.
Yeah.
And this brought me a bit more into the readings of Baba Ram Das, Be Here Now, different books of that inclination. As I was hitchhiking around America, I would stay or visit different ashrams and kind of get a feel for things. And so I was trying to sort out where do I belong in all this.
Right.
When I moved into the commune, of course, they already had Krishna Consciousness, Prabhupada's books, as a basis of what the philosophy beyond the macrobiotic concept was.
Got it.
So that really kind of was my drive there. And I got to a point to where Krishna made it crystal clear to me, it's time to just stop all this, move into an ashram. Of course, now we would encourage somebody, just take up Krishna Consciousness, put it into your family, put an altar in your home, maybe send your kids to the Gurukula, come to the temple on the Sunday feast, whatever.
Right.
Back then, it was move into the ashram, throw everything else away.
Yeah. And that's a great preview to what I want to dig into a little bit more a little bit later on. Okay, thanks for sharing that. So, just to kind of finish on the topic of some of the most meaningful
My highlights.
projects.
Well, where I
in
was
your-
going
in
with
your
that,
devotional
as
life.
I talked about being in Vrindavan and then coming back,
Right.
in 77, I decided to go to India on my own. I had gotten more or less permission as it was at the time, got my own funding together, got my own ticket, and I went to Kartik in Vrindavan in 1977 as a unconnected devotee, no temple affiliate, so to speak. Although I was living in New York at the time. I had begun at that point to get very serious about studying deity worship, and the White Deity Manual, as it were known, the Archana Paddhati, had come out, and we were studying and reading this. And so when I went to Vrindavan, my program was I'd get up and go to Mangalarti at Krishna Balaram, and then I would just wander Vrindavan in the pre-dawn hours and the early morning hours, and different temples, and of course, the viewers and yourself, you can imagine what Vrindavan was in 77, or I guess that's all we can do is imagine now.
Right.
But I'd go to a temple and I'd hear the pujari behind the curtain chanting these mantras that I was just learning. And this made such an impact on me as to the authenticity of Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
That this wasn't just a Western cult. This wasn't just an offspring from the hippie movement. This was a genuine religion with hundreds of years of history behind it.
Yeah.
So that really impacted me.
Yeah. Can I just share on that note? And I've been referencing my yatra experience, I feel like, on every episode we've done lately. But that authenticity is also what I've gotten out of going to India. And I find it to be really, really important. I don't know what it is, because in the Western world, I guess some part of it feels like it's a little bit of an implant, and we know there's so much of curious looks upon us as, cultish or this and that, and it's hard to put that aside when you're practicing in the West. But when you go to India, it really is, it justifies it and makes it very real, and I've definitely connected on that level whenever I've gone to India to really feel the authenticity and, the tradition that goes so far back, and it's hard to deny its reality, so I can relate to
Well,
that.
that is what gives us an understanding of our heritage. This is a point that I make in speaking on Lives of the Vaishnava Acharyas, understanding who our acharyas were beyond a name that is attached to a song we sing every day, but what their lives were, what their challenges were, what the obstacles were that they had to overcome and how they overcame them. Very instructive for us. So that 77 was one of the big first major aha moments. Then all through the 80s, as I mentioned, my wife and I got married. We lived in New York there together. And then, we relocated after some time due to her health and circumstances. We relocated to South Florida.
Shout out Mother Pashu.
We relocated to South Florida on the West Coast and started another side of Krishna Consciousness in that we did home programs. There was no temple there. There was a collective of 6 or 7 families that all knew each other. We had a health food store that was owned by Rasatala that I managed, and we distributed prasadam. A devotee that's now passed away, Pankaj Dubba, was our cook. And that introduced us to giving Krishna consciousness outside of a temple environment as just regular people living in a house somewhere, householders.
Yeah.
So that was a very significant thing.
Yeah.
At that time, I was being groomed because I was working at Home Depot a little later, and I was being groomed for management positions. And I got a call from the GBC asking me if I would consider coming to St. Louis, my old alma mater, and take over as president, because the then president was departing. And my wife and I spoke about it. I flew up there and looked at the situation. We decided, yeah, let's do this for Prabhupada. So that was another very significant thing that I
like
set
a
aside this
milestone.
business career with goals and very clear benefits to do the family business, you could say,
Right.
which was the excuse I gave when I turned in my resignation. My family needs me in St. Louis, and I have to go and take care of the business, So, and we had just an absolute blast for 5 years. We were asked to give a 2-year commitment. We stayed for 5 and just revamped so much there, restaurant-wise,
Is
preaching-wise.
that the temple that's still there
That's
today?
the temple that's still there
Yeah,
today.
I've been there.
Yeah. And it was just an amazing experience for us. After that, here again, due to health up north and the needs of my kids who are now solid school-age children, we moved to Alachua. And everything started then. Everything that's made my life what it is now began here, I think. Being involved in the installation of Radha Shyam and Krishna Balaram, getting the opportunity, as you mentioned, for Indradumna Swami to reach out to me and invite me to come and be a part of his traveling preaching program. Going to Russia, going to Ukraine, going to Hungary, going to Poland, going to the Woodstock Festival in Europe, being on his parikrams in India every year. These are all opportunities that I got from that association with Indradumna Swami that really opened up this role, as you said, of uncle to a whole range of devotees that I would have had no chance of meeting. You know, I've talked about this with some of my friends in these countries that, you know, what's the chance except for Krishna consciousness that we would have ever met each other?
Right.
So those were really significant milestones when I look back in my Krishna consciousness. And of course, marrying my wife and having my kids just added the icing to the cake, you know.
Yeah.
You know?
Tell me a little bit about the Indradyumna Swami travels. You know, what are the countries that are usually covered when you go out? Because this, from what I understand, it's something you did on a yearly basis for some time.
A yearly
right?
basis for 10 years. It was he and I and Sri Prahlad in the beginning. Then Sri Prahlad stepped away for his own career, and I suggested, hey, let's bring Bhattahari in.
Uh-huh.
And then Bhattahari and I had already had a long-standing friendship from when we were both temple presidents in St. Louis and Laguna, respectively.
Okay.
And so then it became the three of us, and we were just like the three amigos, you know, we just inseparable.
What are some things that, you know, maybe some examples of how the lives of, you know, the people you would reach out to might have been impacted by this particular service?
We did a lot of traveling in Russia. Now, of course, this is all pre-2019. We haven't done any of this since 2019, which, when we look at it, you know, chronologically, it's like 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was pre-COVID, and then there was the war, and so that dissolved everything.
Right.
But prior to that, we would go to places in Russia that not many devotees went to. We would hold a festival in Ukraine that was practically like a national festival. You know, devotees would come from all over, and we'd have, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 people. And so we had an opportunity to share Krishna consciousness, and Indradyumna Swami is very accommodating to his godbrothers. He's clearly the guru, he's clearly the focus of these events, but he has also very clearly got his two buddies with him, Bhattahari and Chaturatma,
Right.
Chaturatma Sri Prahlad, whatever the case was.
Yeah.
And he was never one to be shy about sharing the spotlight. So, you know, okay, you give the class today, Bhattahari, you give class tomorrow, I'll do the kirtan here. And it was all spread around like that.
Yeah.
And so devotees were able to see a practical example in the lives of senior devotees working together
Yeah.
to bring Krishna consciousness and being able to add not only years of experience being devotees, but differences of ashrams.
Right.
Bhattahari and I being householders and Indradyumna Swami being a sannyasi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a nice example for them. They could see, okay, there's a difference here.
Yes.
And let's be honest, Bhattahari is much more of a pure-hearted sadhaka than I am, although we're both in the household ashram. And so, like you see, I became the fun energy of the festivals. You know?
Yeah, I can see you jumping off the stage into a
Yeah,
crowd
few
of
things like that. My
some
reputation
5,000 kids out there.
My reputation for stage diving is well known and well earned.
Yeah, yeah. But I really appreciate what you're saying there, that by having that friendship amongst you with the different ashrams, you brought that into the spotlight, that Krishna consciousness, bhakti, doesn't automatically mean being a monk and all that. And actually, it reminds me of when I did get to play with the Blind Uncle Band, and I got to go to several rehearsals over at Stoke Krishna's Man Cave. I got to see this other side of you guys that is so important for us to know. Because if all we see is each other at the temple, when we're in Dhoti and Kurta, and we're on our best behavior, obviously we always want to be on our best behavior,
Right.
but we're not getting the full picture of what a fully rounded devotee really is. And seeing, the dynamics of you, and mostly it's guys from your men's group in the Blind Uncle Band. And by the way, I'll mention the men's groups as well. You know, I started a men's group thanks to, seeing you in your men's group, and I got to ask you guys questions about the structure of all that. But those interactions where we can really see each other for who we are in full, I think is so important. And it's really cool that you guys were able to show a glimpse of that on stage on those tours.
It's essential for our maturity
Right.
and our progress in Krishna consciousness that we realize that it's not all just about that, like you say, that image in the temple.
Right.
That guy that's got the dhoti and tilak and perfectly, but we have another life. Yeah. Whether it be that we're book distributor out on the streets, like Divyanga, for instance, whether it be that we're a lawyer dealing with the court system, whether it be that we're a salesman in a company like Lowe's or whatever, whether it be that we're an airline pilot like yourself, we have, as householders, another life. This is, again, one of those important things about understanding our heritage. Raghunath Das Goswami came from a very, very wealthy family. Very wealthy family. Prabhupada says the wealth that they had at that time can't be imagined nowadays in our modern dollars. And his parents were not very interested in him becoming Krishna conscious as we would know it.
Right.
And they did everything they could to put an obstacle up for that. But he had a regular life. He was married. He had a wife. He had some inclination was there by the family to draw him into the family business, and he simply wasn't interested. But there was that side of his life.
Right.
Similarly, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, not born into such a wealthy family, but a very devout Vaishnava family, and they encouraged him from the beginning. But he wanted to leave and join Mahaprabhu, and Mahaprabhu said, no, you stay and take care of your family responsibilities, your elder mother and father. And for some number of years, he did that until they realized the end of their life was coming and said to him, okay, now you go and join Mahaprabhu. So, yeah, we have that image at the temple. Right. We have that image that we see on our Facebook profile or whatever. But we have another life. It's like when customers see me at Lowe's and they see me in a different environment, I say, yeah, I have a life outside of Lowe's.
Right.
Similarly, we can say we have a life outside of the temple, but that doesn't mean to the exclusion of the principles of the temple.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a great springboard into what I really wanted to ask you about. And I'm coming at this from me to Uncle Chaz on a very, very intimate level.
Intimate for you and I and a million listeners.
Forget about them. But this is so important to me that I'm actually going to kind of read a little bit of the thoughts that I had. Sure. Because, believe it or not, I'm not a natural interviewer. I don't know how I got into this to begin with. So this whole idea that Krishna consciousness should be joyfully performed, right? I think what we're touching upon here, if we're not cautious, it can actually be dangerous. If all we're doing is sticking to, the externals, and we're not careful about being authentic and recognizing who we are as a full person, it can actually lead to some pretty difficult, I can get quite mental about all this stuff if I'm not careful. So I want to dive into what it means that Krishna consciousness should be joyfully performed, and partly because you're a great example of this by your attitude. I mean, it comes on, and maybe a little bit because you drive a sports car also. But
boy, they're getting all my secrets. My second sports car.
Yes, it is your second one. But I'm going to quote a very dear friend of ours, Shesha Prabhu.
One of my probably my closest buddy for decades.
Yes, he's such an incredible person, both him and his wife Madhumati. And when I first moved here, on recommendation of my own guru, I was going to Shesha Prabhu regularly as a mentor. And one of the things he told me that I've always carried with me is that if your Krishna consciousness is bringing you stress, you're doing something wrong. And so
he never told me that, and I've known him for years.
I think about that all the time. And
that's incredible.
And lately, I've been really in a place where I'm kind of revisiting my relationship with the foundational elements of my life, how I process and apply our philosophy, my interpretation of the rules and regulations, the rituals, the sadhana, how I dress, all that sometimes becomes the priority to the detriment of my actual connection with Krishna, because I'm putting too much focus on all of that. And I think that I can sometimes connect better with Krishna through my responsibilities, how I communicate with people, how I apply myself at work, rather than having the perfect sadhana. And that's, a side of Krishna consciousness that I think is not always highlighted. So this has become quite existential for me lately, and every day of my life I feel is impacted by this process I'm going through. It's like I'm turning my entire life upside down, and I'm just shaking it up to see what kind of garbage falls out and what sticks, and looking at it from a different angle. But it also feels scary, and sometimes that I might be doing the wrong thing, because this impacts, how I practice, even how well I apply the four regulative principles at the moment. But yet I feel like it's an integral and important part of my overall spiritual journey to be looking at my spiritual life from a different angle. So, yeah, all that being said, I was just wondering if you've ever had to go through some kind of reevaluation yourself of how you apply, process, interpret Krishna consciousness, or if you have any suggestions for other devotees who might be going through that. Like, to give a crude example, we know without a doubt there's a lot of devotees out there that are suffering, as we all do, to the point where they gotta have a drink. They need that outlet. Life can be so difficult that they gotta have that little escape every now and then. But that might come with so much guilt that they feel, oh, I can't even show up at the temple, or, oh, I'm bad association for other devotees, and they can be alienate themselves, perhaps. So I'm thinking about our entire society, and just I want to bring up this reality. Get rid of all the taboos and just look at what is a fully real, authentic devotee, all these things considered.
Wow.
I hope it's not too much. Good luck.
Well, as you were speaking on that, 5 or 6 points came to mind.
Okay.
The first thing is, as you were saying, shaking up your life and seeing what falls out and what's sticking.
Right.
That's exactly what we do in Krishna consciousness. Because what falls out are as the Sanskrit word is, anarthas, the unnecessary things.
Mm-hmm.
And what sticks is the foundation that we have. That foundation is going to have been formulated through our upbringing, which in your case was from devotee parents,
Right.
by our association, and by our family dynamics. Mm-hmm. These are the things at our stage of Krishna consciousness that are going to dynamically mold who we are.
Right.
So there's that. The second thing is, as far as, the image we have at the temple and then the other image. It's like at Lowe's. Everybody knows at Lowe's I dress quite nicely. And there's a philosophy behind that, which I'll get to. But sometimes I go in when I'm doing a work day, and I've just got my, fatigues on and a sleeveless shirt, and, I'm dirty, and somebody, oh, I didn't recognize you. Because it's not how we think of, not how they think of me on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
When the idea of dressing outside of the realm of simply dhoti and kurta emerged within ISKCON, Prabhupada basically gave one instruction: dress like ladies and gentlemen. In other words, it was acknowledged that we were not going to be necessarily in full Vaishnava attire, but we shouldn't look like hippies, which is what we're all coming from. Should dress like ladies and gentlemen. Mm-hmm. Now, one can say, well, where does that come from? Well, it comes from Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. When Rupa and Sanatan had to transition into this position as servants in the Muslim government, they adopted the external appearance of Muslim government men. They grew the beard, they had the clothing. In their hearts, which we can see was manifest by the Vrindavan that they created where they lived, was a whole other thing. But the external side, they had to do this for the function of what they were doing. So we have this. Now, as far as a process, a means of processing how to get there, I remember when I first got married and I started working outside. And, when we lived in New York, my wife and I were joking the other day, I couldn't even count the number of businesses that I either owned or worked for or whatever. And I remember at that time trying to, do I dress this way? Do I dress that way? Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was still with us at the time, and he was very well known for his preaching in Africa and adapting to the African look.
Right.
So I said to him, how do I He said, find a style that is uniquely yours, make it yours, and stay with it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't take that as, get into, the latest fashion and forget you're a devotee, but be presentable.
Yeah.
And I've embraced that quite significantly and enthusiastically, and to be fair, I do a pretty good job of it.
And very creatively. You do a great job.
So there's that. The other thing is that Prabhupada said he would consider it a success when our court magistrates, this was his term for the time he was in, were dressed in the suit and tie but had tilak on. Right. Indicating that he understood that there would be a time where we would become professional men. Now, keep in mind, during Prabhupada's time, we were all 20-something, year-olds, knuckleheads, basically. No life experience. Most of us no managerial skills. Most of us very few social skills. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that Prabhupada expected that these young boys and girls are going to grow up and become mature adults, taking Krishna consciousness with them, and they're going to have to figure out how to expand this into a social entity, a society beyond just brahmacharis and brahmacharinis living in an ashram. Right. Therefore, that's why I feel that these types of statements for Prabhupada were there to give us a framework. Yes, it's okay. Yeah. But what has to be there, like you said, that core thing, when we shake things up, what's sticking? Right. And that's what we have to analyze.
Yeah. And I do appreciate you focusing on a very easy example of the dress code and bringing up that ultimately what Prabhupada said is dress like ladies and gentlemen, because that shows that you can be true to who you are, whether we're talking dress or, hobbies that you might have, or just, like when I first got married, I got really thrown off, and I'd get angry that my wife would curse every now and then. Now I've totally accepted that. That's who she is, and I curse too sometimes. But just accepting, not being so attached to the perfection of external rituals perhaps, but still dressing like ladies and gentlemen. To me, that means we are still hanging on and honoring what ultimately makes a Vaishnava, which is our integrity to living a progressive spiritual life towards Krishna and always keeping that in the center. That's kind of what I'm getting out of that example.
The impact we have in our so-called secular life is going to be noticeable by how people treat us. Right. Everybody at Lowe's knows I'm a Hare Krishna devotee. And everybody at Lowe's knows that I'm very involved in the temple, that I travel and spread, our message in different countries and all. And they also know that there are some very set principles that I follow that we don't do. Right. And they also know that there's a certain, I can use the phrase, refinement to daily life that I don't engage in. So if 3 or 4 of the guys are standing around talking trash and I happen to walk up, they'll say to me sometimes, "Oh, wait, this isn't a conversation for you, Chaz." So they're respecting me. They may not think, "Oh, he's a Hare Krishna devotee," but they're respecting that he has a different set of standards, and this low talk that we're engaged in isn't for him. So that in itself is an impact of our Krishna consciousness on our secular working life.
Yeah.
Because people realize, okay, bum, 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 bum. When in previous management at the place where I work, we regularly have a store meeting, an annual or biannual store meeting, and there's food provided. And of course, there's never anything you can eat. The wife of the then store manager knew that myself and 2, I think it was maybe 3 other devotees who worked in the building at the time, had certain dietary restrictions. So she came to us and said, "Okay, so what can you eat? And then what can I not put in it?" And then she would go home and make 2 or 3 preparations under our direction and bring those to these store meetings so that we had something to eat. So there was an example of not knowing, Ajnana Sukriti, as they would say, serving Vaishnavas by arranging for them to have sattvic food.
Right.
So this was something that was known. Oh, they don't eat this, they don't eat that. When they would do the barbecue thing for these outings that we have, the guy that was in charge of all that, he said to me, "Well, I'm going to get some Boca burgers for you, and we'll do those." I said, "Yeah, that's very thoughtful of you, but you're throwing them in the same grill as you get all these dead animals that you're cooking." And I could be frank with him. He understood my, I said, "Oh, okay. Well, what about if I get one of those copper sheets, and we put that on the grill first and cook your food first, take that off, and then," I said, "that we can do that."
Yeah.
So these are examples of the Krishna conscious principles that we will embrace in our own lives being seen and appreciated. And that's our preaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree that it actually gives people inside and outside of our tradition it gives them hope when they see an example of someone who is sticking to spiritual principles, that, okay, it can be done. And I think that's part of the appeal, because a lot of people, I think, have kind of lost hope in that side. They've been turned off by so much in the religious realm, or, across the world and throughout history. So any example of how someone is applying those principles just in their own life, and it just shows, I think, is really inspirational.
Taking something you said a few minutes ago about the use of certain types of language, and you're probably sleeping on the couch tonight for that. I fall prey to that at work sometimes. One of the guys I work with is also a pastor, and then he does part-time here. He never speaks like that. So I went to him one time and I said, "How do you get there?" Because I struggle with that. This is another important thing to realize, that the answers are not only just in our Vaishnava association. Right. We can reach out to others who have good qualities and try to figure out how to imbibe those more into our lives. Now, is saying the occasional 4-letter word the worst thing in the world? Certainly not. Is it Vaishnava? Probably not. Right. But being able to reach out to others who can help us overcome those shortcomings that we see in ourselves, okay, this is a shortcoming I want to deal with, that's also a level of maturity.
Yeah. And I really appreciate just recognizing that even if we have a very ancient tradition that makes a whole lot of logical sense, we still shouldn't walk around, thinking or acting like we have it and others don't. There is so much that can be learned from other people, from other traditions, and having that open mind is important, I think, in both directions.
Having humility is the foremost quality of any true spiritualist, regardless of what tradition or faith you follow. And if one actually has that humility, they don't view themselves as, we're the only way. It's us or nobody else. Now, amongst ourselves, we may speak to the higher level of knowledge that the Bhagavatam has or things of this nature. But if in our interactions we carry a mood of arrogance, that's really detrimental.
Yeah.
Now, one other thing I wanted to kind of respond to that you mentioned there about devotees that are struggling in their lives and turn to different venues of excesses, we could say. We only do that when we have not realized the real joy that can be there from practicing Krishna consciousness. Right. Yes, life's a struggle. It's difficult. Even as a Vaishnava, all we have to do is look at chapter 8 of the Bhagavatam, the prayers of Queen Kunti. Queen Kunti and the Pandavas struggled so much. But because they were deeply devoted to Krishna and deeply connected to Krishna, they were able to surpass that. When we face those types of struggles, we have to find something that gives us that connection. It may be deity worship, it may be chanting our rounds, it may be kirtan, it may be doing festivals, whatever it is. And let that be the impetus to help us avoid these things. And this isn't a judgmental statement, but there's no real validity to breaking the principles once we've accepted them. It doesn't really benefit us. I may be so stressed out, okay, I got to stop by and pick up a beer, If that's the case, then I've missed something. And that may be perfectly understandable due to the stress and the circumstances in our life. But we have to develop, and this is something that you and I as men are notoriously bad at. We have to develop relationships with other men that we can go to them, look, Prabhu, I'm struggling with this right now. I need some help. Yeah. But first, we have to see it for what it is, a shortcoming. Right. And we all have so many shortcomings. But when we embrace something like that, we have to see it as a shortcoming and find someone who may just be nothing more than an uncle, and be able to open up to them. Yeah. And this is one of the things, back to what you were saying as far as sharing with people from other countries that I've visited, that I've been able to do is allow them to open up to me with struggles they're having and then give some practical guidance because I got those same struggles. Right. I'm in the same situation. I may be in a few years senior and a few more years practiced in Krishna consciousness, but I'm just a guy struggling with the six senses, which include the mind like everybody else.
And that's why it's one of the verses in Nectar of Instruction, right? To reveal one's heart in confidence. That's a process that I think cannot be understated of how important it is to have that kind of a space. That's why I appreciate so much the Bhakti Recovery Group, which does that very much. It's creating that sangha where devotees can really share honestly where they're at and relate with each other and find that kind of support too.
No judgment. Okay, Prabhu, this is where you're at. The judgment is not judgment, it's reality. Okay, this is a shortcoming. Let's figure out how to get beyond it. Not, boy, you're really a nonsense.
Right.
Boy, I'm not hanging out with you.
Right.
Not that type of an attitude, but, okay, Prabhu, what can we do to help you address this in yourself so that we can move forward as a group, as friends?
Yeah. And that's where I'm coming from. I would hate for any devotee who is struggling and may not be the perfect example of all those externals or being able to have a perfect sadhana, following the four regs. I would hate for any devotee to ever feel alienated because of that. We should always be fully accepting and loving and just relate with one another. That's part of being a human being, you know?
Yeah. And the answer to that is found in Haridas Thakur's instructions, how we associate. There are some people that are seniors that we serve and hear from. There are some people who are contemporaries that we confide our mind and they confide their mind in us. There are some people who are juniors who we give instruction and guidance and shelter to. And there are some people that we respect from across the room.
Right.
So, we have to know how to associate with each of those groups. And that's what gives us the ability to help each other. That's what gives us the ability to move forward as a collective society. I think of the example of the Amish when they go to build a barn. There's that traditional thing. You get like 50 guys show up and boom, they build, like that. So in the same way, we have to have that type of camaraderie amongst ourselves that somebody needs some help, we step forward and help them.
Right.
And it has to be non-judgmental.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
A point that you started at the beginning of our conversation about being happy as a
Yes.
devotee. We're not always going to be happy. That's the reality. Now, we've got that famous song by Lochan Das Thakur, Parama Karuna, these two lords that, joyfully we perform devotional service. Well, I'm not so joyful, I don't always have a smile on my face like that guy Chaturatma does, But if that smile is all we've got, then what's the point? If our reality is that we are struggling, then we have to be able to approach that. Now, the difficulties that I experience as a struggling devotee like everyone else, generally those are shared with your intimate friends,
Right.
with your, wife, with the spouse. I just had a situation recently where I was asked to speak, and the subject I was asked to speak on had I considered rather controversial sentence. And so I went to some of my close friends and I said, look, here's what I've been asked to do. Here's what I'm reading and here's how I'm responding to that. But I know that the platform that I'm speaking on this from isn't really suitable to approach that subject.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I balance that? So I was able to discuss this and get an understanding of how to move forward with it. But the point being that I had people I could turn to
Right.
that could help me dissect that. So our happiness in Krishna consciousness may not always just manifest as somebody with a big smiley face jumping up and down 10 feet off the ground in kirtan. Our happiness has to be internal and simple. Joyfully performed doesn't mean like, ha ha, whoa! It can also mean very serious, meditative, just, internal focus. The joyfully performed. We get caught up in this a lot.
Right.
Prabhu, are you happy?
Right.
Do you feel okay today?
Yeah, even the pressure of chant and be happy. I mean, or we hear so many stories of those Hare Krishnas. They always look so happy, and so we think that we need to somehow mimic something. So, yeah, I appreciate where you're going with this. What does it really mean to
Right.
joyfully?
And it's going to be different according to personality.
Right.
Some people are rampant extroverts.
Right.
Can't imagine who that would be. And some people are very contemplative introverts.
Right.
Does it mean that the contemplative introvert is not happy in Krishna consciousness because they're not always this external, out there, bubbly, smiling personality? What being happy in Krishna consciousness means is to be self-content.
Mm-hmm.
That's happiness. Happiness isn't an external thing. Happiness is to be self-content. I'm very satisfied in the fact that I've embraced these principles, that I'm living by this lifestyle, and that here I am moving forward. That's real happiness.
Yeah. I can relate that to... I feel like I'm starting to come around with this, but for a very long time, my whole life, being brought up in Krishna consciousness, I've had this unhealthy anxiety of, I got to make it back to Godhead in this life. And that means I have to do all this perfectly. Mm. And I was definitely not self-content in that approach to things. So, I think I'm coming around, first of all, to understand that it's up to Krishna if I'm going to go back to God. He can make me a fully self-realized person in the last split second before I move on, if he so wishes, or not. And but yeah, to be self-content, I think, is definitely key to how to perform Krishna consciousness joyfully, peacefully. And that takes a lot of introspection, a lot of communication, like what you're allowing me to do with you right now, to sort a lot of things out.
It is a fact. Prabhupada, the Acharyas have made it very clear. If we execute our devotional service perfectly, we can go back to Godhead in this lifetime. Does that mean we are going to go back to Godhead in this lifetime? Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot more to it than just, well, I externally did this, this, and this.
Right.
Okay, but what was in here?
Right.
I heard recently that there's, how shall I tiptoe around this without being rude, that there's a place where if at the time of death your body is burned at this place, you become a gopi guaranteed. I tend to think it's not quite that simple. I did this my whole
Respectfully
life.
stay away from that one.
Right. I stayed my whole life. I did whatever.
Right,
But as
right.
long as I get my body burned here, I'm going to be a gopi. It's a matter of consciousness. But more than consciousness, it's a matter of our heart.
Right.
So, yes, we can go back to Godhead in this lifetime. As you said, all these things. Well, is it really so many things? A lot of things that we take just for granted, you know, to the outside world is all the, like fasting from grains on Ekadasi. People just can't relate to that, you know? I mean, unless they're already into some type of dietary restriction or something, you know. But, you know, things like doing Ekadasi or doing half-day fast for incarnations or, you know, just most of what we do as devotees, to the non-practicing person in the secular world, these are just amazing feats of dedication. But we become a little jaded by them just due to our years of doing. And then we kind of think, well, you know, maybe, maybe not. So the whole idea of going back to Godhead in this lifetime, yes, it's available to us. Are we going to make it or not? That's up to us.
Right.
But I don't think it does us any good to stress ourselves out about it.
Right. That's the point for me, is that if I'm doing these things in anxiety and, like I said in the beginning, if ultimately I'm so focused on the to-do list and the numbers and the rituals, and I'm not even like connecting with Krishna in the process, I'm doing something wrong. And so that's where I'm at in my shaking up process is, you know, how do I re-situate myself on a path where I'm making a genuine connection with Krishna the person, and what are the techniques that I can use and implement that work for me to do that?
Two things on that. You said earlier you described the journey. That's really an important thing to realize, because a journey doesn't mean we're already there. A journey means we're on the path. We have a starting point and then an ending point. That's a journey.
Yeah.
And so many things will happen along the way. We get stuck in
Exactly.
this place for a while.
Right.
Oh, we took a wrong turn, then we have to come back and start. You know, that's all the journey. Prabhupada said that to criticize someone that's dirty but is in the shower doesn't make any sense. They're in the shower. Oh, so I'm on the journey. All right, I've got this fault, this shortcoming, that shortcoming. I'm working on this. I excelled at that, whatever. That's what the journey is.
Yeah.
When we get so caught up with the external and not looking at the internal, and this is a little bit of an esoteric pujari example, but I remember one time, one of my puja gurus, Gorkeshava Swami, I was sitting with him and 3 or 4 other people. We were doing a deity installation somewhere, and all the Brahmins were there doing their morning puja. And one of the devotees dropped his shalagram, which was round, and it rolled across the floor. You know, a little embarrassing to say the least. And he started, just going on, how offensive. And Gora's like, stop with all the complaining and reach over and pick him up. So, you know, if you accidentally drop your child, oh, what a horrible parent, man, I drop my kid. Pick your kid up off the floor.
Right.
So if we get so caught up in these external things, but aren't realizing the practical functionality of how we connect with them, we've missed the point.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate, you know, as you're describing the journey, that journey has so many different environments along
Yes.
the way.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to change along the way. We're not always going to be able to apply things in one way when the circumstances are totally different, and we need to learn how to go with the flow of that. We certainly can't compare ourselves to others and try to mimic someone who's in a completely different environment and circumstance than ours. We have to, recognize all these things and act accordingly. So I appreciate that. And, on a kind of an ending note, I want to ask you, without going back into those details of what are the external circumstances, but what's the trajectory that you can identify at this point in your life, so many decades of practicing Krishna consciousness, if you had to identify some of the growth and of your internal realizations along the way and where you are now, what are some things you might be able to share about that?
I think one of the most important things that I've learned and embraced is the necessity for association. My wife and I have been married almost 45 years now, and every place we've lived, the decision of whether we would live there or not was based on, is there association? Who will we associate with? Because that association is going to define how we're able to move forward.
Right.
The necessity of associating with others of a similar frame of mind will give us the strength to overcome so many obstacles. And like we were discussing, we're on a journey. There's going to be a lot of obstacles. It's not to say that just because I've been a devotee for 50 whatever years, that life's a bowl of cherries.
Right.
There are obstacles. There are obstacles to this day. But how we embrace those, that's what I think I've taken away, is not to get completely caught up in the fact that, this difficulty is there. Okay, how do I get beyond this difficulty? I have no reservation if I need to get some extra sleep to sleep late in the morning. I maybe get one day a week, if that, for that opportunity. I'm 72. I spend 8 hours a day on cement floors selling toilets for a living, plumbing supplies in general. But, so some days I just need some extra sleep.
Right.
And so I'm comfortable now. Okay, there, I'll take it.
Of course.
If in doing that all I do is beat myself up about it, then I've lost the whole thing. I haven't gotten any restful sleep, and I'm carrying around a bunch of guilt.
Yeah.
Now, there are certain avenues where I think we have to be a little more restrictive or introspective on that. As you were saying earlier, if an individual's practicing devotional life and just so overstressed he's got to hit the bars, okay, maybe we need to examine that a little more. That's something that we may want to work on figuring out how we can remove from our life, because it's a basic, fundamental tenet of our lifestyle. And there are so many other people that do it, not just religious people, but I work with a lot of people who just, I never drink. I don't touch coffee. I never eat this or that or the other, and they've made a commitment like that. So there are people out there outside of our Vaishnava realm that have certain, how did Bhaktivinoda Thakur describe it? Self-imposed regulative principles. His last writing, Bhaktivinoda's last writing, was 12 self-imposed regulative principles. That's an important word in the title, self-imposed. Not imposing them on you, I'm imposing them on me.
Right.
And so we have to have certain things that we're going to regulate ourselves by, and when needed, seek others to help us with that.
I really like that, what you're highlighting with the self-imposed. Also, because it means we've come to a place of genuine desire for that freedom. And it's not even, I took a vow and now this is what I got to do. No, self-imposed in the sense that I firmly am convinced that this is what I want for the right reasons.
It's an internal realization.
Right.
Self-imposed indicates that. It's an
Right.
internal realization that I need this.
Yeah.
May not be necessary for you. I need this.
Right.
And then having that realization, how do I support that? Who can be there to give me assistance in that goal? That's part of what we have to do.
Wonderful. Chaturatma. Come on, that was great.
Well, I appreciate the work that you're doing, along with the likes of people like Nam Ross with these different broadcasts and podcasts and formats to bring topics out that need to be discussed.
Yes.
You know, we go to the Bhagavatam class, we hang out at the Sunday feast, and the conversation's almost predictable.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the format. But in one-on-ones and in efforts to deepen our own spiritual development, we have to be able to talk about these things.
Yeah.
We have to approach the fact that I like to go and have a beer once in a while. Is that good or is that bad? And what can I do to overcome it if it's not good, which I think we've already established.
Right.
You know, I need some assistance in being able to focus my household dynamics on Krishna. Mm-hmm. Prabhupada says in his writings that it is the duty of every householder to have deities in their home, because that changes the home from a place for sense gratification to Krishna's home. Mm-hmm. So little things like that that we can do that help us refine and redirect. I know our tech guy Udi just had a baby, and I guarantee you that things he was able to strictly do a year ago are thrown to the wind now. You know?
Is that true, Udi?
Yep. I mean, it's quite common when families have, you know, young children that the standard in the home will likely be different than like the standard in the house for my wife and I, who haven't had kids around in, you know, 2 or 3 decades.
Obviously, yeah. That's
So-
such a perfect example
Yeah.
of how we have to adapt and be understanding of one's circumstances and yeah, go with the flow and receive the gifts that are there all along
We
the way.
have to be practical where we're at, what our circumstances are, and how that can be used to facilitate our advancement in Krishna consciousness.
Uncle Chaz, thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure. I hope everybody enjoys this. If you got any questions, you know how to reach me. YouTube, I have my own channel, Chaturatma. Can view different topics there and reach out to me if you got any questions.
Hare Krishna.
Thanks, Namamrita.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
the opportunity.
Thanks for joining
Hare
us.
Krishna.
Haribol.